On today's episode, we're going to hear from Pastor Kenneth Morikang, who was born in Cameroon, has lived in Russia, the Ukraine, and the Philippines, and now resides in Bulgaria working with the church. Listen in as Pastor Kenneth and I have this conversation in the back of a rental car. Welcome to a World of Good podcast. I'm Nate Tatman.
And I'm Andrew Gale.
And we are two friends
who love Jesus,
care about the church,
and travel the world to share stories of people who do the same.
Our conversations happen in all kinds of places.
Like a coffee shop and an airport terminal.
Or even the back of a crowded taxi.
But no matter where we go, from Argentina to Zimbabwe,
we capture stories of the good God is doing around the world.
And we hope those stories will do you a world of good. Welcome to a World of Good podcast. My name is Andrew Gale, here with my host. I almost said my name is Nate Tatman because that's what's written on the screen. Welcome to a World of Good podcast. I'm Andrew Gale, here with my co-host Nate Tatman. Nate, give us a quick update of what you have been up to in the previous couple weeks.
Yeah, well, as you know, or at least the audience knows, I was in Jacksonville at some point in the last few weeks, and I'm currently at home, but we were on a 2-week trip where we drove through let me see if I can get this right. We drove through 5 states, visited with 10 different pastors and churches, and we traveled over 3,100 miles.
Wow.
So we had quite the journey, and I'm going to be leaving in a few days, and I'm going to be doubling that amount, I believe. So I'll stay tuned for another update, because actually the next time we record, I'll be on the road, so I can give a more specific and detailed update on my whereabouts. So I'm pretty excited.
That's awesome.
About that. Yeah, especially I think before we started recording, you had asked, if I'm looking forward to this trip, and it's going to be a long trip, and because we haven't been traveling, I am looking forward to this. I know it's going to be exhausting, it's going to be long, but I've got that travel itch that I need to get out.
So you traveled 3,100 miles with you, your wife, and how many of your kids were? And was there 4 kids with you?
Four daughters.
Wow.
4 daughters. Not just kids, daughters.
And that's true. They're not kids.
So I have 4 daughters from the age of 21 to 12, and my 12-year-old, as she reminds us on a daily basis, is going to be turning 13 here in a couple of weeks. So my life, the way I describe it to people, is every day is an uphill battle for me, that I have to scratch and claw and fight my way to the top in my household, especially when we only have 1 bathroom.
Oh,
so,
no.
Yeah. And even our dog is a female. So I'm definitely a minority, and everybody should feel pity for me and pray for me.
Feel bad. We all feel bad for you, Nate. I actually don't feel bad for you at all. But I wish there was a video camera on your 3,100 mile journey. I think there probably would have been some really good outtakes for a reality show had we sent
the
you
good,
the
the bad, and the ugly, I'm sure.
That's right. Well, as a reminder, if you want to learn more about our podcast, you can follow us on Twitter at A World of Good Pod, or on Instagram, you can search for A World of Good Podcast. We post updates on our Global Strategy Facebook page. We have a website where you can learn more information about the podcast, and at the website, you can also sign up to get new episodes in your email inbox. There's lots of ways to connect. We're so grateful that you listen to these stories of what God is doing around the world.
Yeah, and so Andrew, what do you have today for us in the world of coffee talk?
Now for coffee talk.
Well, I saw an interesting statistic recently that I wanted to share. There are 2.25 billion cups of coffee consumed worldwide on a daily basis.
Wow.
So 2.25 billion cups of coffee consumed on a daily basis. And coffee is, get this, and of those 2.25 billion cups of coffee that are consumed on a daily basis, at least 1.25 are consumed in my office, I think.
I was going to ask you that.
But the other piece that I think is really fascinating is coffee is actually the second most traded commodity in the world. Isn't that incredible? The second most traded commodity in the world, just falling short of crude oil. Isn't that incredible? So like outside of crude oil, the next most traded commodity is coffee. Now that is legally traded, because there are things that are illegal that are traded that don't make the list, but we won't get into that. Legally traded commodities, it's number 2. Which is pretty fascinating.
I think you revealed on the first episode that you roast your own coffee. Is that correct?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. Have you been roasting anything lately?
I have, yeah. I got some beans from the country of Timor. So I think one of the things that's really fun about roasting coffee is you can get beans from all over the world. There's actually, if you go online and type in coffee belt, you can see an image of the coffee belt that kind of slices across the middle of the globe. And in that coffee belt, that window is where the most of the coffee is grown worldwide. Like Mexico down to the middle of South America, but then across through middle part of Africa and Asia. And you can look at that and find where the best coffee is grown. And there's all kinds of things that make coffee taste different based on its location. So the climate or the weather of the place, whether the altitude, higher coffee that's grown higher up in altitude is often better. If it's close to a volcano with volcanic activity, temperature, humidity, all of that is an important factor. But that's one of the things that I find really fun when you get a new bean that you're going to roast, is to kind of learn about the country that it comes from. So Timor is not a country I had a lot of knowledge about, but I got to learn recently that, it's an island in the Asia Pacific region. It is split into 2. So it's Timor is the island, but there's East Timor, which is its own sovereign country. And the west half of Timor is actually part of Indonesia. So really cool to be able to learn a little about where my coffee that I'm drinking now is coming from.
Nobody else can see it, but in your Kansas mug, might I add.
I know. So yeah, also a very cross-cultural experience. If you've ever been to Kansas. Yeah, I have my Kansas home mug. I'm a proud Kansan. I have no problem shouting that from the rooftops. So yes, I love Kansas.
Yes, and we know. Going back to season 1, episode 1, when we
that's
talked
right.
with the Beverleys, I was
outnumbered by Kansans, which should be the case in every situation you're a part of. You're always in good company if you're outnumbered by Kansans. I have no idea what that means.
It is on my road trip list, so I will be going through and staying in Kansas in a few days. So.
I know you could probably stay with my parents. My mom's listening to this. I'm sure she could. I could just give her your cell phone number, and you can go stay at my parents' house.
It may be worth it just to get some stories of you that I can share on future podcasts.
Yeah.
So going back to what you were just talking about with coffee plants that are grown at different altitudes, volcanic activity, temperature, all that kind of stuff. It's funny that you mentioned this. I had this conversation with a cousin of mine. We were at their house for supper the other night, and I was trying to, because he served us coffee, and I can't even believe I'm saying this or admitting to it, but it was Folgers coffee.
You're very anti-Folgers.
I am very anti-Folgers because, again, you might as well just take some dirt and put it in your coffee maker and filter that through your coffee maker. But so I was talking to him about why robust coffee beans like Folgers and Maxwell House are not good. And as I say that, we're probably never going to get them as a sponsor of this podcast, are we? Folgers or Maxwell
That's probably
House.
True. Yeah.
But I was trying to talk to him about how you can explore and experience all these different coffee flavors because, if you buy them from these different regions and try them out from these different regions, they just have this built-in taste, these natural flavors. So
absolutely. And so you just mentioned there's a number of different kinds of beans. The 2 most common are Arabica and Robusta beans. Arabica are the highest quality often and are used for a lot of different coffees, but Robusta beans are also commonly used. But yeah, the way that they're processed, whether they're dry or wet processed, where they're grown, all kind of give it a different flavor and a different experience as you drink the coffee. One of the things I'm excited about is the next 2 episodes we're hoping to have some guests come on and share with us their coffee experiences. So hopefully by in the next 2 episodes we'll get to hear from some other coffee experts and the joy of roasting coffee.
So you said other coffee experts. Are you calling yourself an expert?
Oh, that's true. No, I'm not calling we will hear from other
connoisseurs.
Well, Nate, what do you have for us that's in the news?
Yeah, so actually, quite honestly, I was a little nervous because I had nothing at the time, like the day before we were going to be recording this. I was scouring the news. I'm panicking. I'm like, what in the world am I going to talk about? But I did find an article yesterday. It came out on Christianity Today, and the title of this article is Russian Evangelicals Fined for Missionary Activity During Pandemic. It goes on to talk about how two Russians, specifically two Russians, were passing out tracts and were eventually fined the equivalent of $65 and $80. There's a third person that this article talks about, somebody from South Korea who is actually holding meetings in a house and sharing the gospel with people. And this person was actually fined the equivalent of $400, and deported. And the article goes on to share that so far in 2020, more than 40 people have been punished for violating a Russian anti-missionary law. And so I started doing a little bit more digging in terms of what this law means and why it exists. And what I found was this law was put into place in 2016. In 2015, there was a law that was passed that said all religious meeting places need to be registered with the government. So any church that is holding meetings has to be registered with the government. And then in 2016, this anti-missionary law was implemented and said that it is illegal to evangelize anywhere other than recognized church buildings, which again must be registered according to this law that was passed in 2015, must be registered with the government. And it's also interesting that this law, this anti-missionary law, it was labeled as an anti-terrorism legislation, which is important to note because they want to prevent foreign extremists from exerting influence in the country. And so I'm sharing all this because I think it's so important for us on many levels. One, the majority of our listeners reside here in the United States, and we have, a little bit of an idea of what it means to have our religious freedoms being controlled by the government. For a while now, prayer and scripture has been banned from schools. There are ways around that if it's student-led and that sort of thing. During, this time right now that we are in with the coronavirus and this global pandemic, there are states like California who are not allowing churches to meet during the coronavirus. And there's a couple of churches I know that are again caught up in litigation because of that ban. But overall, I think it's important for us to look outside of the U.S. and to see what other countries are going through and how their religious freedoms are being taken away from them. As some of you may know or may not know, we actually have some churches in Russia, in kind of the south central part of Russia. And so it's important as Americans, again, that especially when we're visiting countries like Russia or other countries where there are restrictions on proselytizing or evangelizing or, doing anything in the name of Christianity that's sharing the gospel or the good news, or again, whether that's out in the public square or even inside homes, it's important to know that as guests, we are coming into those countries. And if we are caught doing something illegally like this, or if we are caught and we put those churches, those pastors on the radar of the government, that could be very detrimental to those ministries. And so it's just to be aware of this. It's important for us to know about this. It's also important for us to pray for the church in Russia as the government continues to specifically persecute Protestant evangelical churches, the missionaries and their pastors.
I've had people come to me in the past that are traveling to, Asia or other places where Christianity may not be looked at as favorably. And they've asked me the question, do you think that we're going to be safe in that country? And I always find that to be an interesting question because as an American tourist, you're often very safe in the countries that you're going to. So my response is usually, I'm not actually worried about your safety. I'm worried about the safety of the Christians you're going to visit.
Yep.
Because often it's exactly what you're saying. It's not that as an American or as an expatriate that we would experience any kind of danger. We could be putting in danger the lives of those that are Christians living in that country, that are trying to worship and maybe trying to do it under the radar without the government being as aware of what's going on. And so I think that's just so important. We can often think about this in a very individualistic or personal way and not recognizing how the actions we do, the things that we do, have ramifications far outside of what we think.
So, for example, I was on a trip in the last few years. I won't say when and I won't say where, but I was speaking at one of these churches. And I was, it was in a rented facility. And so it was in a public facility. And as I was preaching with a translator, the pastor, the translator was not the pastor. And so the pastor was actually at the back of the room standing by the door as I was preaching, because he knew that people were going to be curious if they heard an American or at least somebody speaking English talking in that room. And sure enough, several times while I was preaching, people were opening up the door to try to see who this person was. And he kind of opened up the door, looked at their face, saw that they weren't part of the church, and had to tell them it was a closed, meeting or whatever. But there again, he was taking precautions, and just like you said, taking precautions so that if it was a government official or somebody that wanted to report something to a government official, he was trying to keep that from happening. And so it is so important to ask those questions and to be aware of that when coming into a country that you're going to be speaking, doing ministry, sharing your story or whatever. It's just, we have to be sensitive to that.
So I'm really excited for people to get to listen to this interview. Nate, when did you actually record this interview with Pastor Kenneth?
Yeah, so this would have been the fall of 2019. I believe it was October, either October or November of 2019.
Okay, so just under a year ago. And just for people's imagination, as they're imagining you having this conversation, tell us where you were when you interviewed Pastor Kenneth.
Yeah, so Pastor Kenneth and I, we were actually in the back seat of a rental car and doing this interview, and we were traveling with missionaries Daniel Kim and Zach Langford, and we were actually traveling around Bulgaria. Boy, probably it was definitely more than 3,000 miles that our family did, but we were traveling around Bulgaria, visiting different churches and some historic sites. So it was kind of a road trip. I got out our recorder and our microphones, and we had a great conversation. It was actually a long conversation, so we divided this up into two parts. So today you're going to listen to part one.
And in this, he's going to give us a little bit of a picture of Bulgaria. He's going to talk about kind of his history and how he got to Bulgaria and into the work that he's currently doing as a pastor in this community. Is that correct?
Yeah, this first episode, this first part is really more about his story. And as you said, he was born in Cameroon, and he now resides in Bulgaria, but it wasn't just a direct flight from Cameroon to Bulgaria. He spent several years in Russia and Ukraine and the Philippines. It's such a fascinating story.
So here is part one of the interview with Pastor Kenneth from Bulgaria.
Well, Kenneth, maybe just start by introducing yourself, who you are, and where you're from.
My name is Kenneth Morikang. I come from Cameroon. I now live in Bulgaria.
Yeah, where at in Bulgaria?
Plovdiv, Bulgaria.
And you've got a very, very interesting story. I've known you for, 10 years now. And
yes.
It seems like every time we're together, I hear a little bit more about your story and just your experiences growing up. So you were born in Cameroon,
Yes.
and you've ended up here in Bulgaria.
Yes.
Maybe just share a little bit about how you got here, because what I know is it was not a direct route to Bulgaria. So just share a little bit about how you got here in Plovdiv.
Yes, when I left Cameroon, it wasn't my plans to end up in Bulgaria. So I left in 97 when I already graduated from the university, and I was trying to look for something to do in Europe, to migrate to Europe to better my status. And so the easiest way for me to live was to pass through, to get to Europe was to pass through Russia. So I got into a university there, hoping to get a master's degree. Then I moved over to Europe. But while at the university, I learned about the seminary or Bible college, which is in Donetsk, Ukraine. And so I decided, due to some other things that happened in my life while I was in Russia, I decided to pursue theology or missions.
So what was your degree in prior to that? And what
I
master's
was-
degree were
No,
you?
I was. I had a bachelor's degree in economics.
Economics. Okay.
Uh-huh. So I was hoping to get a master's degree in maybe in advertisement or some other economic field.
Okay.
But then, due to some events happening in Russia and my being active in one church there, I decided to pursue missions. So we found out about this university in Ukraine called the Donetsk Christian University, which was almost free for me to study there. And so I applied, and they accepted me, and I easily got a visa, and I left Russia for Ukraine. That was already in '98.
Okay.
The summer of '98 in August. So that is how I got to Ukraine. And then after 3 years, I finished there with big dreams of going to be a missionary in China. So some of the professors and teachers who were coming to teach us in Donetsk, they said they will help me get to China in missions. And so, but I'll have to stop by in the Philippines in order for me to get some documentation and some experience before I go to China. And so I went to the Philippines, and I was there for about 3 years without having the possibility to go to China. So I decided to return to Russia.
So during your time in the Philippines, what did you do during those 3 years?
I was working with a mission that was dealing with agriculture and feeding the poor. And so we lived at a mission place, which was like a school for young children, but the agriculture ministry was something that was separate from the school. And so we traveled around the Philippines teaching people how to grow sustainable food and teaching them the gospel. That is how the
Wow.
mission worked.
Wow. So you were there for 3 years,
Yes.
doing this ministry, traveling around, and at some point you realized it was not possible. It was no longer possible for you to get to China. Why China? What was the reason for that?
Well, I don't really know the motivation, but I just felt that I should do ministry in China. And so I wasn't really motivated by a particular thing and a particular place. It was just, I thought that anywhere in China I can do. But somehow it didn't work out that way.
Okay.
I didn't have any plans, any specifics and all
Okay.
that.
So, so you were in the Philippines for 3 years doing this,
Yes.
realized China was no longer a possibility, and then what? Did you go back? Is that when you went back to the Ukraine?
I think I got so much frustrated with the fact that I couldn't go to China, and my ministry was just becoming too monotonous. And then with other personal issues and documentation, also in the Philippines, it's not easy to live there as someone with a temporary visa, because you keep extending it after every 6 months, and it's very expensive. And so I think I just got burnt out or tired, and I decided to return to Russia to continue with my master's degree in economics.
Okay.
So when I
So
returned,
you didn't return to the Ukraine. You returned to
no, I
Russia.
didn't return to the
Okay,
Ukraine.
gotcha.
I returned to Moscow because I had someone there, a friend who was studying something at that time
Okay.
at this university in Moscow. So I returned there, and cutting back, while in Ukraine, when I was studying, I met with my wife to be, and we were quite good friends while studying. And so when she finished, she had a very strong vision of coming to Bulgaria to work with the POMAC ministry, which is Bulgarian-speaking Muslims. And so she was very interested and passionate about this ministry because her ancestry is Bulgarian, and she had never been to Bulgaria, so it was more of a curiosity also on working. So,
and she's originally from the Ukraine.
She's
correct?
Ukrainian,
And-
but her ancestry was from Bulgaria.
Okay.
Her grandfather left Bulgaria as a kid to Ukraine during some times of persecution and so on. So they migrated to some parts of Ukraine, and then some of the family split to some other areas, and her dad ended up in Donetsk, where they grew up. Her mom is actually Russian, and so from Ekaterinburg. And so she's never been to Bulgaria. Even her dad never was in Bulgaria. She was the first family member to come back here. But anyway, when when I was leaving to the Philippines, she came to Bulgaria, and so we're keeping in touch all the time. Even when I returned to Russia, we continue to be in touch, and sometimes in 2005. We decided that no, we will have to do ministry together as a couple, and so I once again stopped doing what I was doing and decided to move to Bulgaria so that we can get married, and we did that in 2006.
Is that how you proposed to her?
Oh,
you said we have to do ministry together, so let's get married.
It was more, it was more than that. But of course, we're talking about getting married, to get proposal. She took months to actually think about that and gave me a response, and all that. But
wow, she took months.
She took months actually. I proposed sometime maybe in like September, and she answered me maybe February or March the next year.
Oh wow! What were you doing that entire time?
No, we continued to talk, but she hasn't really thinking about spending our life together. And so when she finally did, I came to Bulgaria, got married, and
so she was already in Bulgaria.
Yes, she was already in Bulgaria at that time.
And you were still in Russia, in Moscow?
Yes, I was in Moscow.
Okay.
I already left the Philippines 2004.
Okay. So, and just knowing a little bit about your backstory, I'm sure for her, the thought process was she felt very strongly that God was calling her to Bulgaria and to the Pomaks and to do ministry there and missions, and so what would that look like then to do that as a family and a couple, and she was factoring in all of that. I'm assuming.
Yes,
that was part of her waiting for months.
She was actually doing much when she came. Because the Pomaks are not people who are located in one place. They're located in small villages across the Rhodope Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of her work, she was going from village to village. And so I think it was better for her to have company.
Okay.
To have someone that they can go around together. So
we'll just kind of, one of the things I want to ask you about, since we brought it up, is the Pomak. So Bulgaria as a whole is an Orthodox Orthodoxy. Bulgarian Orthodox is the national religion
here,
of Bulgaria. And the Pomaks. Now, for how many centuries did the Ottoman Turks rule Bulgaria? About
For 3 to 4 centuries,
yeah, and so
16th to the 19th century.
so through that time, they reigned. The Orthodox Church was kind of pushed to the side, kind of
Yes.
underground. There were a few places. The Rila Monastery that we visited was one of the places where the Orthodox Church was.
Continue to thrive. Mhm.
Yeah, they were able to keep that fire lit, I guess. And the Pomaks, then, as you mentioned earlier, are Bulgarian ethnicity, but they don't. They are Muslims, correct?
Yes. Simply, the Pomaks are called Bulgarian-speaking Muslim. That means they are ethnic Bulgarians who converted to Islam at the early stages of the Ottoman invasion. And so these were some ethnic Bulgarian groups that were already unified even before the coming of the Ottoman Empire. So that is why they had some communication among them, because the villages is not like just one location.
Yeah,
They are located in different places, even passing through other non-Pomak villages in order to get to Pomak villages. So
How were they? You said they were already unified. How were they unified?
they were unified in some type of ethnicity, because for me, they had some background, some ethnic relationship that they had for centuries.
Okay.
In this area, because Bulgaria is an area that many tribes and many ethnics have passed through, from the Thracians to the Greeks to all the nations that have passed through this place, even back to the Romans. And so every time that they come, they bring their own people, and so it's a mix here.
Okay.
So even at times the Pomaks, they claim that they are the original ethnic group that used to live here before the others came in, the Slavs and others.
Okay. I had never heard that before. That's
Yes,
interesting.
but anyway, so they decided not to join the Ottoman Empire by religion, in exchange for them not to displace their people.
Okay, they were allowed to stay in their villages.
Yes,
and
not to
okay.
displace their people, and not to cause them problems, because they are simple farmers, and so they accepted to take the religion. Because the Ottoman Empire, usually when they invade a place, they will bring in their own people, and then they will take some of the people who are living there, and they will send to other areas of the empire. And so that is in order for them to have some type of peace, and so they will mix the people up. And so the Pomaks, they had a deal, and they were left alone. So most of them became strong Muslims later on, but recently they are just nominal. Very few Pomaks are actually practicing Muslims now in Bulgaria, but they
Okay.
still know them like the Bulgarian language speaking Muslims.
Gotcha. So going back to your story then, so Svetlana grew up in the Ukraine, learned about her Bulgarian heritage through her grandfather, went to the Bible college, and began to feel a call to reach the Pomak people.
Yes.
And kind of during this time, she came back to Bulgaria. She was doing some missions work out in the villages, going from
Yes.
village to village, sharing the gospel with the Pomak villagers. And you guys were connecting via email, letters,
Phone calls. in
phone
those
calls,
days.
and she finally said yes. She
Yes.
answered your proposal,
Yes.
and then you moved from Moscow to Plovdiv,
Plovdiv, yes.
in Bulgaria. And so so what happened then? As you moved back into Plovdiv, you guys got married here. What did the first few years of life and marriage look like for you guys?
So since she already was having a permanent residency here in Bulgaria, so we got married, and we decided that we'll stay here for a while we worked together with the Pomak ministry. So I was going with her to the villages, doing the work, learning the language, and I had temporary residency, documentation work, and so we just settled down with the family. And a few months later on, I also got a small job, and so I was working and she was home. And weekends we will go around, go to the Pomak villages. And so that is how our life was the first year. And then we had a child the next year, and things started to change gradually. I want to say that she always knew that she was a Bulgarian, because in those days during the Soviet Union, when you were born, on your birth certificate is written there clearly your ethnicity. And with her surname also, it's not a regular Bulgarian, Russian surname or Ukrainian surname. So everybody was always asking, "Oh, this is an interesting surname. I mean, where do you come from?" Even though she was born in Ukraine, so she always knew that the family came from Bulgaria.
So what year were you guys married?
2006.
2006. And you and we first met in
2009.
2009. I came over here when I was a pastor at County Line Church in Indiana.
Yes.
Our church supported the missionaries, Dave and Kathy Simpson.
Yes.
And they came and served the church here in Bulgaria, and they lived in Plovdiv and served with the Church of God in Plovdiv, which was the first church in Bulgaria, correct? For the Church of God?
Yes.
Was in Plovdiv. And so how did you guys get connected to the Plovdiv church, and as well as with Dave and Kathy?
Well, before I came, my wife my fiance already had connection with the Simpsons. They actually helped pick me up from the airport when I was coming, drop me back, help with the wedding arrangements and everything. They were so much nice guys. So when my wife came to Bulgaria, Sveta is her name. So when Sveta came to Bulgaria, as she was doing ministry, she got to know other missionaries, especially foreign missionaries who are in the field. And one of them, who was working with Turkish-speaking Bulgarian gypsies, was Thomas. And so Thomas Otto is a German missionary who has been living in Plovdiv for a long time. So meeting with him, and so he connected. He also introduced her to the Simpsons. And so she became friends with the Simpsons. And as a missionary, you have a home where you live, and also you need to have a church where from time to time you can worship there when you are not out doing some other ministry work. So that is how she started to worship with the Bulgarian church, because the Bulgarian language was closer to the Russian language than the Turkish language where Thomas had his church. So that is the connection, how she started to go to the Bulgarian church. She was welcomed there, and she started to attend that church, and the Simpsons were doing ministry in that church. So
Okay.
that is the first connection.
That again, I just learned something new. I didn't realize that the Simpsons knew you before you guys got married. I thought that was after
Yes,
the fact.
they knew about me, we met the first time face to face when they picked me
When
up
they
at the airport.
picked you up at the airport.
Yes.
So you mentioned the Turkish church. So here in Bulgaria, the Church of God has 3 Bulgarian churches.
Yes.
Bulgarian speaking churches.
Yeah.
And they also have how many Turkish speaking churches?
They have now about 9 Turkish speaking churches
Okay.
and then 1 English.
And then 1 English. And we'll get to that here in a minute, because there's some exciting things happening with you and the Agape Fellowship. So how many, just out of curiosity, how many languages do you speak?
At this moment, I speak
this
English.
moment.
I mean, I speak.
Are you planning to learn more in the future?
Maybe. So Cameroon is a very, very diversified country with very, very different tribes and languages. Actually, Cameroon has officially more than 150 tribal languages,
Oh, my word.
or dialects, as we call them, but due to the colonial setup of the country, English and French, or let me say French and English, are the official languages that are used in Cameroon. So I grew up from the English side of Cameroon, so
Okay.
English is my first language, and French is my second language. And then at home we spoke our native language, which is Meta language, but we grew up in other villages, and so I spoke some of the languages in those villages, even though now I think I can understand them, but I can't speak them due to the fact that I haven't spoken them for a long time.
Okay. All right. So,
So
hold
I have
on real quick. So
English,
French,
and Meta. Those are the 3 languages
The 3.
that I
And then
can
there
actually
were-
speak.
there were a couple other
Yes.
dialects,
Yes.
Cameroonian dialects that you had learned as well.
Yeah, 2 or
So
3.
Okay,
Let
we'll
me say
say
3,
we'll
yes.
say we'll say 2.
2. Mhm.
So that's up to 5 languages right now.
Yes, when I grew up. So on my way now, I picked up the Russian language
You
first.
just- what do you mean you picked it up?
That means I learned Russian language.
Okay, but did you learn it in school? Did you learn it formula?
yes.
For
Yes,
did you
I
formally-
learned Russian language formally because I went to university in
you had
Russia
to study,
yes.
to have a certain level.
So you need to study the language officially.
Okay, there's 6.
So I studied Russian language. In Ukraine, I didn't have to study the Ukrainian language because I studied they do things there in Russia. That was the Russian
Okay.
zone where you have the war now. So I spoke Russian. Then in Bulgaria, I learned Bulgarian.
Okay.
So that is how many languages that
That's
I know.
7 right now.
Yes.
And what about when you were in the Philippines?
Oh no, in the Philippines, everyone there spoke English with me, and I
Okay.
did things in English. So I didn't learn the language there, Tagalog.
Okay.
So I know some words here and there, but I didn't learn the language. There was no use. And the reason is because I thought I will be leaving soon. Every time I was like, I'll be leaving. So I didn't really get down to figure that I
Yeah.
could actually settle
Sure.
there. So it was always in my head like, oh, it's time to go. So I didn't-
at this moment, you only speak 7 languages. That's it.
yes,
Wow.
7 languages
And do you have any others on the horizon that you're wanting to
to learn.
learn at
No,
this moment? No.
at this moment, I don't think I want to learn more languages.
I think 7 is a good number to end on in terms of languages.
Yep.
All right, so coming back to the Bulgarian church, we have 3 Bulgarian-speaking churches. We have 9 Turkish-speaking churches, 12 in total. So you guys landed in the church here in Plovdiv. And again, our church at County Line, we connected. We were supporting Dave and Kathy as missionaries, and so that led to several trips over for me, as well as some others from County Line, various trips and things like that. So just kind of maybe share a little bit on, as you guys moved here to Bulgaria, you're starting your family. So again, you've been married for how many years now?
13 years.
13 years, and you have 3 beautiful girls,
Yes.
Christina,
Nina, And Michelle.
and Michelle, and 3 lovely, lovely girls. And they speak multiple languages as well.
Yes.
English, Bulgarian,
and Russian.
and Russian.
No.
Okay. So, Andrew, how many languages do you speak?
Well, not as many as Kenneth. I I speak English and I am passable in my Spanish, and that's about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can say hello and thank you and goodbye and some of those things in lots of different languages as I've traveled, but nothing that would make me conversational.
Yeah. I'm still learning English. Probably will be for quite some time. We speak quite a bit of Spanglish in our house, and probably leans more towards English than Spanish. But hopefully, in about a year or two, I will also be fluent in Spanish. That's my goal. So, but yeah, I
That's awesome.
obviously don't speak as many languages as he does. But that is one of the things that fascinates me about Europe. You have so many cultures and languages living in such close proximity to one another. And for the most part, these cultures are forced to learn to get along with one another and do get along with one another. Obviously, there's some exceptions to that, but it's a cool experience to be in Europe and to see and to hear all these cultures and languages.
Well, thanks so much for joining us for the first part of Pastor Kenneth's story. Make sure you tune into part 2, which will land in just a couple weeks as we hear more about the ministry that Kenneth is doing and his connection to our team in Europe and the Middle East. Thanks for listening to A World of Good. A World of Good is a podcast production of Global Strategy and Church of God Ministries. Our theme song is Colorado by Leo Flores. If you want to join the conversation, visit us at Twitter at A World of Good Pod, on Instagram, A World of Good Podcast, or visit our website, chogglobal.org/A World of Good. And join us next time as we share more stories of good from around the world.